Good afternoon and welcome to today's Industry Week webcast, Building Blocks for a Digital Future, Current State, and Strategies for Success, sponsored by SOLIDWORKS and Dell Mealworks. My name is Jill Jesko and I am Associate Content Director with Industry Week. And before we begin, I'd like to explain how you can participate in today's presentation. First, if at any time you are having audio difficulties or your slides are not advancing, simply hit your F5 key to refresh your webcast console. If you are running pop-up blocking software, you will need to disable that to view the webinar. And if you are having any technical difficulties during today's session, please press the !help button in the upper right corner to receive assistance in solving common issues. Additionally, this webinar technology allows you to resize the presentation by clicking the maximize icon in the upper right corner to enlarge the window. And we welcome your questions during today's event. To submit your questions, simply type your question into the Ask a Question window on the left side of your screen and then hit the Submit button. We will be answering as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that follows the main presentation, but please feel free, and in fact, we encourage you to send in your questions at any time as they occur to you, and we will add them to the queue. Please also be aware that today's session is being recorded, and it will be available on the Industry Week website within the next day for you to review. You will be notified by email when that archive is available. When the webinar ends, we ask you to please take a moment to complete the feedback form that will appear on your screen. I would now like to welcome today's speakers. We have joining us Steve Bazat. Steve is Chief Marketing Officer, Dell Mealworks, Dassault Systems, with more than 30 years of ERP and technology experience. Steve has been at the forefront of helping organizations recognize the value of digital transformation on their people and processes. Steve is responsible for all aspects of Dell Mealworks, brand management, demand generation, and product marketing. His focus is on aligning products with industry requirements, as well as positioning Dell Mealworks with the strategic direction and requirements of the brand's manufacturing customers and prospects. Steve has an engineering degree from the University of Kansas and an MBA from Rockhurst. Also joining us today is Michael Buckley. Michael is the Manufacturing Domain Roles Portfolio Director for 3D Experience Works, SolidWorks. His passion is manufacturing and automation, coupled with helping others realize their full potential. His previous notable milestones include Elite AE, author CAMWorks Handbook, CNC programmer / operator on a variety of machines, mills, lathes, water jets, routers, etc. Also joining us today is Jonathan Katz. Jonathan is the owner of JSK Communications. John is a content marketing writer and journalist with more than 20 years of experience in the field. As a writer and owner of JSK Communications since 2012, John has worked on projects for Fortune 500 companies, educational institutions, and consultancies. Prior to starting JSK Communications, John served as the managing editor of IndustryWeek. He has considerable knowledge about key industrial topics, including lean manufacturing and continuous improvement, the Internet of Things, environmental health and safety, as well as operational best practices. And with that, welcome. And John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jill. So first, just a little bit about the survey. In March, Endeavor Business Media, the parent company of IndustryWeek, emailed invitations to IW readers. As you can see here, the majority of respondents reported revenues of $1 billion or less, so we would consider most of these companies small to mid-sized businesses. Also, you'll see here that the majority of respondents also identified themselves as having a C-level or VP upper management position within their company. You'll see on the right-hand side, we also break it down by department level. So you'll see 47% were corporate executive management, and that's followed by engineering, R&D, and technical management. So on to the key findings from onto the key findings from the survey. Here we asked manufacturers which of the following best characterizes the progress of your digital transformation. Most of the respondents identified themselves as being in the early to mid stages of the digital transformation. As you'll see here, advanced and mature stage manufacturers represented 13% of the total participants. Typically, manufacturers in these later stages of the digital transformation are using more automation and smart technologies. This would include the Internet of Things, 3D virtualization applications, and similar technologies. What we don't show here in this graph is that manufacturers of all sizes are making progress with their digital journeys. 76% of large manufacturers, 60% of mid-sized manufacturers, and 42% of small manufacturers have at least reached the mid-stage of their transformation. And we also have a poll question here related to this particular slide that we want to ask our participants here, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to answer.
Okay. Yes, we would like our audience members to assist us and provide their feedback. And I will read the question and give you an opportunity to answer it. So the question, again, where would you consider your organization's digital transformation progress? And again, your four choices: early stage, mid-stage, advanced, mature. Early stage, mid-stage, advanced, mature. And of course, we're going to ask you to please select the response that most fits your organization. And we are seeing results populating. Again, if you have not responded yet, please select a response that is most appropriate: mature, advanced, mid-stage, or early stage. Where are you on your organization's digital transformation progress? Okay, it looks like our results are in.
All right, so so I don't know, Mike, Steve, if you wanted to comment here. It looks like, now Jill, the 63.2% is that, which stage is that? I don't see
the D stands for?
It's early stage, is the orange.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, that, I mean, it totally makes sense to me. So, because the audience that's probably attending is probably, if you ask me, looking to learn more about this, and therefore is probably at an earlier stage. Whereas an expert would probably maybe not be on this call and not have as many questions. You can continue. Thank you.
Okay, so the next slide here, we asked respondents which type of technologies they're using in their digital transformation efforts. In these charts, the black bar represents all respondents. The blue bar represents respondents in the mid to mature stages of the digital transformation, and the gray bar represents respondents in the early stages. You can see here that the use of automated technologies such as digital document management, as well as cloud computing and business intelligence applications, is significantly higher among advanced to mature stage manufacturers. In fact, only 12% of respondents in the early stages say they're using business intelligence or advanced analytics platforms. And I believe we have another poll question here for you related to the types of technologies that you're using.
Yes, we do. And we're going to ask the audience to please participate once again. And while you are thinking, I am going to read the slide as well. So the question is this: is your company's manufacturing currently using these technologies? And your options are cloud computing, robotics, both of those, or neither of those. Again, is your company's manufacturing currently using these technologies? Cloud computing, robotics, both cloud computing and robotics, or neither cloud computing or robotics currently?
Okay. So Steve and Mike, it looks like we have about 35% so far. They're still getting some answers here who are using both cloud computing and robotics. Just wondering your thoughts on that. If
Well, I mean, so I have a thought on particularly on robotics in both. I mean, if you're a repetitive manufacturer today, you're using some form of robotics, right? Material handling, in the machine type of equipment. So that answer doesn't surprise me. And I think that's the chief data on this screen is that everybody's using robotics and a lot of people are using cloud computing. So you get a pretty high number there. If you're more of an engineer to order and you're assembling 1, 2, 3 pieces of equipment at a time, you probably aren't using robotics because you just can't use robotics in those situations. So this tells me that something along 40% of the people on this webcast are probably repetitive manufacturers and using some form of robotics. Thank you. That's what I have to say.
So I think some of what you're seeing too is with the last year in general, you're seeing lots of companies based on socially distancing and reorganizing their facilities, adopting more of the automated technology to be remote. Cloud computing has a lot to do with remote access and people being able to monitor and access their facilities when they all can't be close together. And then you're seeing a lot of the robotics, whether it's cobots or industrial robots, the traditional welding type stuff, you're seeing a lot of those being adopted because as I have to socially distance, I may need a cobot for pick and place next to a machine. So we've seen some of these trends in the past, on the SolidWorks side from engineering and the CAM solutions, but it seems to have accelerated in the last year specifically from what we've seen from our customers.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to the next slide here. Here we ask manufacturers which 3 applications do they consider essential to their business. Regardless of the digital transformation progress, ERP and CRM applications are considered essential to respondents. Those in the early stages of the digital transformation are also likely to rely on applications such as spreadsheets or entry-level accounting systems, while those further along in the process are using more advanced applications such as quality management systems and manufacturing execution systems. Steve, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on these findings and what it says about the progress of manufacturers are making toward automating some of those back-end functions.
Well, I mean, I consider it, good news, one, and enterprise resource planning, ERP, is obviously, what I do. So I was pleased to see that it was considered an essential application. And frankly, not surprised to see, spreadsheets come in, higher on the chart too, because I think a lot of companies still use the ERP system. You run a lot of reports, you run a lot of automated processes. But one of the great things about ERP systems is they collect data and you can output it to a spreadsheet, so you can do a special analysis that only you want to do. And I think you see the power of those two linked together. And then my own personal experience, CRM and QMS, quality management systems, extremely important to everybody. CRM on the sales side and quality management on the mantra of, my job is to deliver a quality product on time. So all of that makes sense to me. Execution systems, same thing. Mike?
Yes, I think when you look at this, what you're really looking at is the digitization of companies being able to access their data at the right time in the right place. Again, it fits to that remote working a lot of us have to do these days. So, being able to still get a part or components out on time with the correct quality, but still connecting everything together, that's what's going to determine success versus failure in the new global manufacturing market that we all live in.
Okay, so the next slide here is on data storage. Here we ask participants where they store their design and production data. Nearly half of respondents use cloud-based file management and storage systems. Respondents who are further along in the digital transformation process are more likely to use cloud-based systems and shared file management systems, while respondents early in the digital transformation process are more likely to use local file systems. Business drivers impacting technology decisions. So here you'll see that manufacturers in all stages of their digital transformation cite common business reasons for their technology investments. This includes 60% of organizations that cite growth and profitability as a key driver, 60% of all organizations that cite changing customer demands as a key driver. And then when we break it down by maturity level, 37% of organizations in the mid to advanced stages prioritize supply chain visibility solutions compared with 19% of early stage adopters. 37% of organizations in the mid to advanced stages also rank regulatory challenges as a top reason for technology investments, compared with 28% of early stage companies. I think you're looking ahead with some of the recent supply chain disruptions that we've all been reading about in the news lately. It wouldn't be surprising to see more manufacturers increase investments in solutions that enable greater supply chain transparency. I'm wondering, Steve and Mike, do you agree with that statement?
I said it before, and I, the top, what's driving technology decisions? It's the general managers, the owners. They want to deliver a quality product on time, profitably, and that's always been a driver that has never changed. And then I think that the COVID era really pushed that changing customer demands thing up towards the top of the chart, if you will, because people either had to or opportunistically shifted production from one product type to another product type, or customers demanded that they do so. So I think in regular times you probably see that lower down on the chart and competitive pressure and quality higher up on the charts. But that makes complete sense to me, what I'm seeing there.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that sort of come into play too is what I sort of call the Amazon effect, right? Because today for most of us as consumers, if you go to Amazon and you order something, you get constant feedback of where it's at, what process it's in, when it's going to be delivered. You're constantly being aware of where that order is in the process. And I think some of that type of expectation is sort of fitting into what we see in the manufacturing side, where it's like, if I can look on my phone and get this real-time feedback from Amazon, why can't I get it for my 1,000 parts that I just ordered to build the next widget, right? So I think some of the consumer side of things are filtering into the business as far as expectations for companies to overly communicate, where in the past it was just more of that it shows up when it shows up mentality.
Okay, thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. So the next question here, we asked participants if they retooled their operations or product offerings to meet changing demands. And this is another potential driver for new technology investments. We obviously saw a lot of this happening during the pandemic, whether it was manufacturers increasing production of certain in-demand products such as sanitation technologies or various consumer goods, or changing over entire production lines to new product offerings. You'll see here that 44% of all respondents transformed at least a small part of their operations, while a quarter of all respondents made significant changes, with respondents in the later stages of their digital transformation more likely to make major changes to meet increasing demands. So we have another poll question here for you. If Jill, you want to pull that up.
Sure thing. And before I read the poll question, I want to just briefly thank our audience for participating in these polls and adding to the survey results. So this poll question is, what is your organization's response to changing demand? And your options are, yes, we transformed a small portion of our operations to meet changing demand. Another option is, yes, we have shifted a significant portion or significant portions of our operations to meet changing demand. And of course, the third option is, no, we haven't changed any of our current offerings or operations to meet changing demand. And of course, we are asking you, again, to please select the response that makes most sense for your organization. And when that is done, we will move to the results, and I will just read the responses one more time if you are still debating in your head which of these to choose. Again, the question, what is your organization's response to changing demand? Your options are, yes, we have transformed a small portion of our operations to meet changing demand, or yes, we have shifted significant portions of our operations to meet changing demand, or no, we haven't changed any of our current offerings or operations to meet changing demand. And this is your last opportunity to provide a response if you haven't done it yet. And then we will be moving over to the results. So again, thank you for participating in these polls.
So it looks like here we have about almost 46% who have shifted significant portions of their operations to meet changing demand, and almost another 30% who's transformed at least a small portion of their operations. So I know, Steve, Mike, if you wanted to talk a little bit about, how that factors into technology investments and capabilities.
Again, I'm going to stand pat with my original comment. Is like, in my personal experience with manufacturers, half of them like this says switched over to make a different product line or a different variation of a product line. So this jives completely with what I've seen, and then I think another factor with it technology-wise is what Mike mentioned, the work from home and the difficulty of having people work side by side. I think that drove a lot of technology adoption in the marketplace that was associated with the changing demand. Also, just the changing availability, if you will, of labor and materials. So this appears to be accurate to me. Mike?
Yeah, I think you're also seeing there's a lot of new emerging markets based on the adoption of technology lately. So when you look at digital transformation and you look at the automation that you can do through the workflows before the machines are ever turned on, it gives you greater capability to go find those new markets that are emerging. Because it is a global marketplace today, a product doesn't have to necessarily be made in the same location that it's designed. So that opens up for companies that are really on the cutting edge of digital transformation to go grab new things that they may have never done before, and they can automate and retool very quickly and efficiently.
It was funny.
Thank you.
It would take people.
I'm sorry, go.
It would take people 6 months to retool before the pandemic era, and when their jobs and businesses were on the line, we saw people retool in weeks. It was amazing. The old saying, necessity is the mother of invention. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So on to the next slide here. So here we asked respondents to rate which business metrics matter most to their organization. Key performance indicators related to reliability, including on-time delivery and quality, ranked high. Some other key findings here: 63% of respondents cite on-time delivery as their most important metric to track performance. An equal number of respondents cite quality, rework, and defects as their most important metric. And also significantly more digitally mature companies rank cycle times, quality, inventory levels, and supplier quality as the most important KPIs they track. I think a key takeaway to consider here is that when organizations integrate more of these sensing, data collection, virtualization, and analytical capabilities across their enterprise, they enable more opportunities to track these KPIs, such as supplier performance, real-time machine data, inventory levels, and cycle times. Steve, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I think 3 really quick points. One, I think this chart proves more than anything that manufacturing is KPI driven today. If you look at all those, they're all pretty high, right? And I think you also see that digitization, if you will, automation, it builds repetitive process into the manufacturing day-to-day business operations. They've got a best practice, and they're following that best practice in the order that best practice is supposed to be followed in. They're not randomly doing things anymore. They're doing them in a defined sequence, and they're measuring how that sequence is processing. And I think you see that right here with the on-time delivery, the defects, and on down the list. They're measuring things, and they're executing according to a plan. Much more now than I would say they did maybe, I have to go back a little bit, but say 10 years ago, where it was a little more random. Thank you.
All right. So here, I'm actually going to skip here to the next slide, because this one we break it down by maturity level. And here we asked participants about the impact that their digital transformation technologies have had on their operations. And digital technologies are true game changers. A large percentage of manufacturers are reporting that KPIs have at least somewhat improved after implementing digital solutions. Some key findings to consider here. 63% of respondents indicate that production metrics have somewhat or greatly improved since deploying digital transformation solutions. 75% of advanced to mature organizations report improvements to production metrics compared with 46% of early stage respondents. And a large percentage of manufacturers also cited similar improvements to manufacturing cycle times, quality, and on-time delivery. However, there are significant opportunities to further leverage technology, especially in the areas of machine performance, product design, and supplier quality. So here we ask participants, you'll see here on the right-hand side that budget constraints, employee reluctance to change, a challenging learning curve, outdated technologies, and technology silos ranked as the top 5 challenges that all respondents reported. Also, when asked how they would rate their ability to leverage technology to improve performance, 40% of respondents rate their ability to leverage technology as effective. 37% say it's average. 14% rate their use of technology as highly effective. And 9% say it's below average. Mike, did you have anything you wanted to add about these findings and some of your thoughts?
Yeah, so when we look at the data and we sort of follow this, it sort of aligns with the interesting time that we live in manufacturing right now, because there's a couple things going into play that all sort of relate to what this chart shows, and that is we have an aging manufacturing workforce that generally adopted technology at an earlier time, and as people get older, their ability or willingness to adopt new technology is below par, we'll put it that way. And then we have the manufacturing domain and process moving faster than it's ever moved before, coupled with a skills gap of where new people are trying to come into the workforce, but they want to use new technology, but we're up against a barrier of how do we adopt new technology with an aging workforce, but still fill the skills gap while producing parts faster and at a higher quality than we've ever done before. And what we see here is the real struggle between all of those dynamics coming together at once.
Great, thank you. The next slide here is related to competitive challenges. Here we ask respondents what are their greatest competitive challenges, and you'll notice it's pretty consistent across the board. It's almost even on pricing and manufacturing flexibility. It's not surprising that manufacturers in the earlier stages will report greater challenges leveraging automated systems. I don't know, Steve, did you want to talk a little more about some of these challenges? I don't think it's too surprising, but I wanted to get maybe some of your feedback on how technology can help manufacturers overcome some of these hurdles.
Okay, this one I have strong feelings about. Cost control and scaling. I'll just focus on those 2 words, right? When you talk to a manufacturer today, their number one concern is the cost of labor. A temp worker now is up to $15 an hour from roughly $10 an hour, right? And in any given least repetitive process, your labor costs are probably about a third of your cost, right? And then when you talk about, and I'm going to draw this to a conclusion, we talk about scaling, I think what they're really talking about is it's hard to find enough workers to meet customer demands. It's not a shortage of machinery. Sometimes it's a shortage of raw materials like plastics right now. But cost control, I think, ties to labor, and I think scaling ties to labor. And I was just at a manufacturer yesterday, and it kind of ties back to this entire presentation in as much as how are they dealing with those challenges? They're turning to more digital and automation technologies. They're not replacing workers with technology. they're compensating for the lack of workers with technology, which is allowing them to control cost and scale up their operations. So instead of seeing an operator at every machine, you're seeing an operator handling 4 machines because those machines have been so highly automated, as an example. So and what they're staving off with competition is they're trying to maintain control of that business so they can keep it onshore and compete with other labor markets fundamentally. Mike, you have any thoughts?
I think you covered most of it for that slide.
Good.
All right, thank you. So the next slide here, on the left-hand side, you'll see that we asked manufacturers whether they have a technology a platform that integrates their back-end enterprise systems, such as ERP, CRM, or MES. We thought this was important to ask because to gain that single source of truth and eliminate silos within an organization, you really need these systems to be integrated. Some key findings here to consider: 59% of respondents already have or plan to implement a platform that fully integrates their business systems. 70% of manufacturers in the digitally advanced to mature category have or plan to have a platform that fully integrates enterprise business systems, compared with 45% in the early stages. Then over here on the right-hand side, you'll see we asked whether respondents' ERP systems provide visibility into order processing, shipping, production, or scheduling. We included this because we think these are all essential manufacturing functions to track within an enterprise system. And you'll see here that manufacturers in the later stages of their digital journey tend to have more visibility into key processes over less mature manufacturers. So the next question here that we asked related to design systems. So taking end-to-end visibility a step further, another critical area to consider is the integration of design systems with your ERP and other enterprise systems. Most respondents don't currently have or plan to have design systems integrated with their ERP or other enterprise systems. On the left-hand side, you'll see that 42% of all respondents have either integrated their design systems with their enterprise systems or plan to do so. Again, it's much higher with manufacturers in the advanced to mature stages compared with the early stage respondents, with 75% in the early stages indicating they haven't integrated their design systems with their enterprise systems and don't plan to do so. The chart on the right represents responses to a question we asked about design system functionality. You'll see here that product data management and integration with ERP systems ranked high. Virtual testing of products is one that will likely become increasingly important as manufacturers face more competitive pressure to add functionality to their products or shift the focus of their product offerings altogether. Mike and Steve, do you agree with that, or do you have any other further input related to this question?
Well, I agree with it, but Mike's the expert here, so I'm going to defer to him.
Yeah, I mean, it aligns with a lot of what we see. It's interesting because, when you look at the vertical domains, we talked about earlier, design is generally fairly efficient, and then, there's other little pockets that are efficient within a company, but often how to connect all those things, there isn't a clear-cut technology that a lot of people are aware of that allow you to actually bring those together and make it easy to use. So a lot of companies just resort to doing it the manual way, and there's lots of data input. And to be brutally honest, most efficiency within a company doesn't really happen at the machine or, how I'm packing a box. It happens in the workflow that happens between the inner departments. So it makes sense that more advanced companies have already figured out that I can have double-digit improvement in efficiency just by working on those connections and workflows versus the ones that haven't adopted digital transformation yet and still just do things in a manual way and have a body sitting there doing data entry. So it does align with everything that we see.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Mike. Go ahead.
At that manufacturing event yesterday, just as an example of what Mike just said, they made medical products. When they start making a medical product, it's got to go through 3 stages of validation. You know, the initial stage, the final tooling stage, and then the ability to run it over and over and over. And the amount of handoffs that occurs from that design through the final ability to replicate that production, you know, tear it down, set it back up, and prove you can produce the same part again. You know, they've automated that workflow, and they've cut a validation down to 6 weeks from about, you know, I'll say 3 months, and through an automating that workflow that Mike just kind of described. And they use that ability to do that quickly as one of their key selling tools in their sales processes, that we can bring you up your product, get it validated, and do that in 6 weeks. And the next guy down the road that you're talking to is going to take 3 or 4 months to get that same job done, which is, I think, proof positive of what this slide is talking about. Okay.
All right. Thank you. So that actually wraps up the survey overview. And I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Mike and Steve, who are going to provide some additional insight into some practical applications for digital transformation technologies. So, Mike, Steve, I'm going to pass things on to you here.
All right, slide 32 is my first slide, and I'm going to go relatively quickly. I'm going to give, we talk about digital transformation, and it's a big fancy word, and I wanted to give 2, you know, boots on the ground examples about how I see it work in everyday life in a manufacturing environment. One of them deals with real-time production monitoring, and the other one deals with a concept which I'll explain completely when I get there, which is called capable to promise. So real-time production monitoring, that's a busy chart, right? And what that chart really says is that these are all the machines running on the plant floor, you know, and how fast they're running and how well they're running and when they're going to be done and how many parts they've made so far. So, you know, actually watching the machine in real time so that management can see what's going on. And the color codes, they're sort of self-evident. You know, yellow's not too good, green's great, red is a problem. Picking on that red one there in the middle, something's wrong with that machine, right? And you want to know what that is. So we look at the cycle times, the production monitoring data coming off of the machine, and we look at it and we say, well, the barrel temperature's okay, the cycle count is kind of good, but man, the fill pressure is just bouncing, you know, and cycle time is just bouncing all over the place. This is not good, right? We've got to do something about this. So the next step in that process is like, okay, well, that job's still got to go out. I got to find a replacement for machine 33. It's not working. And this is a chart that is what's called runs best. It's the job. It's run on other machines before. What's a good machine to run that job on? It's obviously the second one there. And so I'm going to take that machine and I'm going to set it up and I'm going to get it running that job. So the red machine there, number 33, is being taken offline, and the job's been moved over to the machine 05, so that you can continue to run production. What happened there was you were getting ready to make bad parts. You were making some bad parts. You caught it with real time, and you shifted production to the next best available machine. And that's a great example of the use of real time. We go back and we look now at the machine that's now running the job. I believe it was 05, and we can see that everything is running within the parameters, which are the blue bars. So just a real quick example of when you use digital IoT transformation, whatever you want to call it, to connect a machine to an ERP system, an MES system that's monitoring it, you can catch problems before they become critical, and you can use the power of the ERP and the production planning software to rejigger your operations to continue running those jobs and get them out on time, which, as the survey showed over and over and over and over again, is the number one goal of most manufacturers, is to get the delivery done on time. So that's a good example of digital transformation in action, and you'll see that sort of transformation occurring in factories all across North America. The next one is a different example, and this is an example of really pure ERP power. And the customers called up and they said, I need 10,000 feet of tubing and I need it in 10 days. Now, this is not an opportunity one wants to pass up on, right? And so I use, when I talked about capable of promise, I use the power of the ERP system to say, can I promise these guys 10,000 feet of tubing in 10 days? I check my inventory levels, right? And I go, I've only got 23 feet of it on hand. I'm going to have to make it, right? So the next thing I do is I go to capable to promise, and I indicate that I'm talking about that item and that I want 10,000 feet of it delivered by the 8th, right? And I turn the ERP system loose on it, and the ERP system says, nope, cannot do that. I'm red lighting you. You can't make that promise. And you're thinking, well, that's really helpful. I can't make that promise, but I need an answer, right? So I drill down into that, and what the machine tells me is that the issue is you don't have equipment available to run that. You're going to have to free up some equipment somewhere. So I say, okay, I'll do that. I'll run a new schedule. I'll put that job on it. I'll auto schedule it. I'll prioritize that job, and I'll tell it I want you to include that tubing in our workflows, right? So the next thing you do is you run capable to promise again, obviously, and it says, yeah, you could probably make it, but I'm giving you a yellow light. I'm saying you could maybe make it, but there's some risk involved in that. And I say, where's my risk at? The machine tells me that if I expanded the labor I put on that job, I could get it done. So I allocate the labor to the job. I run capable to promise again, and I get a green light. So what's happened here is that the ERP has gone through, do I have the raw materials? Do I have the machine? Do I have the labor? Do I have the tooling to put this job together and execute it on time? When I started, I didn't, but I was able to refactor what I was doing on the shop floor and get a green light and make a commitment to this customer to do that. And I did that while the customer was like on the phone or waiting for a return email. It wasn't a day's worth of planning. It was 10 or 15 minutes worth of replanning to get to that point. And a lot of what we talked about in the earlier presentation, the survey was, ability to change and to be agile in the services you're offering the customer. And that's, I think, just a real good example of how ERP, as a digital transformation tool, enables people to make those sort of on-the-fly commitments and changes in their daily operating plans. So with that, I will turn it over to Mike in slide 43, and then I think we'll take some questions.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, my part will be super short, more of a summary here. So if we look at digital transformation, and I mentioned a little bit earlier about ecosystems, I'm going to reference two of our amazing, outstanding, very popular products we've had over the last 25 to 30 years. And I'm going to start with, SolidWorks, and SolidWorks and some of the products that you may see is more of an ecosystem, right? So, in the last 25 years, there's been a really good ecosystem built around that, the CAD design, simulation, data management, the ability to create technical documents, like that all sort of stems from engineering, but it's really an ecosystem with a short reach. So, a company may have adopted this and they saw a bunch of improvement and everything was successful. But, on the other side, then we have like our Dell Mealworks solution. It was handling more of the overarching business thing. But again, it sort of lived in its ecosystem, right? when you look at digital transformation, and what a lot of companies have is they have all these different little ecosystems that they use throughout their facility. And although they are very great and very powerful and work together, what we're really talking about with digital transformation is one unified platform that connects all of those together seamlessly without a million hoops and translators and buttons and things like that to jump through and huge IT overhead. What we're really talking about from a digital transformation standpoint is I create all the components that I'm used to creating. They seamlessly connect to an overarching business transformation system, and then from there I have the ability to access the right data at the right time for everyone to be successful. So when we talk digital transformation, we talk that more advanced and where companies are looking for solutions. In our case, we're talking about 3D Experience Platform and 3D Experience Works with connecting SolidWorks and Dell Mealworks and our Dell machining and our Simulia FEA, making it so there's that one source of truth for everyone in an organization to be able to access in real time without all the manual data entry that's included there. And that's where you really see companies taking advantage of that efficiency. In today's world, everyone can afford the same CNC machines, the same tooling, the same robots. That's really leveled the playing field. And like any new equipment you would buy, you're going to be single-digit percentage improvements. But when you really start talking workflows and processes and interdepartment connectivity, that's where companies are seeing, the 20, 25, 30% efficiency improvement is just because they're taking out all those manual steps that they may have grown with over the last 30 years because technology didn't exist at that time. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jill, and we'll go ahead and do some Q&A session.
Can I make a comment on this slide before we switch it off?
Sure.
Thank you. Remember when earlier I made a comment about the medical device manufacturer doing validation on a new product? This just really illustrates it, Mike and audience, is the power of the Works platform to pull everything together. They design that component, they simulate it, and get sign off from the customer, that we're good so far, right? This is all looking good. And then they go into that validation step, which is really governance, writ large, so to speak. And they're validating that design, obviously, and they're validating the manufacturing and production of it. And then, as I mentioned, then they're using their ability to do that quickly and efficiently to sell the customer on let us do the job, right? So this slide, I think, illustrates how, you think about production, you think about design, you kind of think about them differently, but when you roll them all together and you do them really well, you end up with a sales and marketing tool and an ability to govern production that's unique. And so this is a great illustration of that same validation process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that great presentation. A few of our audience members have already submitted questions, so we are going to jump right in. If you haven't submitted a question yet and you have one, submit it now. I also would like to remind you to please take a moment to complete the feedback form that will appear on your screen at the end of the webinar, which is coming up shortly. So, keep your eye out for that. So let's start with our questions. And our first question comes from Dean, who asks, what has been the biggest factor preventing manufacturers from adopting technology and automation for their facility? Is it funding? Is it skilled labor? Is it something else?
Well, I can go ahead and take that one.
Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I'll be really quickly. I think it's what the survey said. I think, one, I'm always surprised how reluctant people are to spend money on some of this when the payback is so clear and the technologies. I mean, there's out there technologies like AI and stuff, but when we're talking about production monitoring or quality management type tools, design tools, the reluctance to spend the money is always incredible to me. And I think it really ties back to the change factor. They're just really reluctant to take a risk and make a change. and they really need to be convinced of the payback and the low risk of making some of these adoptions. Mike?
I think a fair amount of what I've seen too is a lot of it is education. It's hard to find a partner that's going to educate you on the process and do what's right to make you successful versus just selling you something and it's just one piece, like a point solution, right? So I think a lot of companies are hesitant to adopt things because 20 years ago everybody tried to adopt an ERP system and a lot of it didn't work for the average manufacturer, so everyone's gun shy about those things. So skilled labor is a little bit of it, funding is a little bit of it, but I think in this world, I think it's really who do you turn to trust to be able to guide you down the process to really help you be successful with an overall solution, not just sell you product A. I see that a lot when I go out and visit customers and work with customers.
Okay, thank you. And we are going to move on to our next question quickly here. It comes from Bob, who asks, where's the best place to start an IIoT transformation pilot? Manufacturing, production, design, or other?
I'll take a stab at it because I have a strong opinion about that. When you're talking about IIoT, I think you start with making sure that your machines have production monitoring up and running on them. Again, if you're making onesie-twosie kind of things, you can't do that. But if you're running some kind of repetitive, making sure you have production monitoring running on those machines, throwing off signals that tell you whether the machine is running, how long a cycle is, the various process parameters for that machine. It's so straightforward to do. There's a number of good vendors out there that can apply that technology, and you just get so much information from simply knowing that a machine is up and running and producing according to plan. That's my comment.
Yeah, I agree with what Steve said.
Okay, then let's move right on to our next question, and it is, what's the difference between manufacturing and production in 3D ExperienceWorks?
So I'll take that one. That's actually a really good question, and some of it sort of depends upon what the definition is of manufacturing and production. But when we're talking 3D ExperienceWorks, 3D ExperienceWorks is bigger than just CAD in the cloud or designing something, right? What it's really about is capturing the entire process, whether it be upfront sales communication, downstream working with customers to ensure that everything's successful. But when we start talking manufacturing, there's a couple different levels that we have. We have machining and process planning to a certain point that then feed into Dell Mealworks. So when we're talking our CAM solution is one example, we're talking about, machining, verifying, virtual twin type component with some of the best capability out there to be able to machine it. But then we're also talking our 3D Lean tools to be able to communicate and collaborate between shifts to identify any problems that can be transferred to Dell Mealworks for, some of the capable to promise and some of the feedback that Steve showed earlier. So, it's sort of an all-encompassing thing, but it really just sort of depends upon which focus you want to focus on first, which fits the tools that are in 3D ExperienceWorks, to be 100% honest and transparent.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike. Next one.
I'm sorry, I was going to go. It looks like we have time for one more question here, and the question is, in accepting a customer order using ERP planning, how do you measure the trade-offs that might be associated with accepting the order? I'm concerned about the impact on commitment dates to other customers.
I'm going to read that as I've got an order, should I take it, right? What should I promise against that order? And I'm just going to go back to what I said about capable to promise, but it generalized it a little bit with ERP. Can you, have you made it before? Can you make it? Do you have the raw materials? Do you have the labor? Do you have the equipment available to promise that order to take it? And also another dimension, which we really didn't talk about too much, is that order profitable for me? which is a big component of should I take the order. And the great thing about ERP in general is that since you track all the costs that you're putting into an item, you know what it costs you, and you obviously know what you're selling it for. So when you do take an order and you set a price point and you make a promise to deliver it, you know what promise you're making, and you know how profitable that commitment's going to be for your business. It's the visibility of the past and the ability to accurately predict the future outcome, the promise, so to speak, that makes taking an order with an ERP system much less risky than taking one just based upon seat of pants knowledge.
Okay, we are out of time. I would like to first say great presentation, gentlemen. I would like to thank our speakers today, John Katz, Steve Bazat, and Mike Buckley, as well as our sponsors, of course, SolidWorks and Dell Mealworks. Most of all, I'd like to thank you, our audience members, for your kind attention and your questions. And on behalf of Industry Week, have a great, tremendous, productive remainder of your day.
Thank you, everybody.